What's up, my dominators? Rico Garcia with another fire episode. Today is going to be really exciting because we're going to be talking about estimating with someone that I personally have done quite a bit of business with in the past. And this is going to be a really exciting episode. I had tons of fun. Hopefully you will enjoy listening in as well. Before we jump into everything, just want to go ahead and give a big shout out to our show sponsors, starting with the very own CNR magazine, which, by the way, if you haven't gotten your subscription yet, make sure that you do so. All you got to do is just head on over to cnrmagazine.com, upper right-hand corner of the site. You're going to see the big red subscribe button. Just go ahead and smash that, put in your information, and boom, you are officially subscribed to CNR Magazine. And that way you can keep your finger on the pulse of the market and know exactly what's happening within our industry. That sounds like fun, right? Also want to give a big shout out to our platinum sponsors, both the Legal Corner and the Public Adjusting Corner, with Lawyer Britt in the Legal Corner and Carlos Machine, the Claims Machine, in the Public Adjusting Corner, which, by the way, each and every single month, they have their very own episode that they drop. These are bonus episodes talking about things not only in the legal realm, but also in the public adjusting realm, and how they can go ahead and help us as restoration contractors and, people in the service-based industry, and things that are honestly just changing consistently, it seems like, almost on a day-to-day basis. This is also a great opportunity too, if you have any questions or any concerns, or you have a case and whether it's, thinking about bringing in a public adjuster, or maybe it's something having to do with your contract or how to deal with a certain hiccup. This would be a great opportunity for you to pick up the phone and shoot us a call at 678-TALK-2 us. So 678-TALK-2-US, and just drop us a line. Let us know who you are, where you're calling from, and whatever your comment and or question is. And what we'll do is we'll play that live in one of our future episodes. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this particular episode. Today, we are joined by Mario Rios from Claims Preparation Experts, and he is one of the estimating gurus that we've had the pleasure of doing business with in our restoration company as well. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about estimating, what some of the biggest mistakes are when people are putting together their estimates, where they're leaving some profits totally off the table, and just how to look at overall job pricing and, really mapping everything out to maximize what it is that you're worth as a restoration contractor. And of course, some of the red flags that some people just are dumping into estimates that, quite frankly, shouldn't be there. So this is a really cool episode. Hope that you enjoy. Without further ado, let's go.
Welcome to the Restoration Domination podcast, where you learn actionable advice that moves the needle and helps service-based businesses dominate. Here's your host, Rico Garcia Jr.
All right, guys. What is going on? Mario, welcome to the show. Are you ready to help us dominate?
Good buddy. We are going to gonna have a good talk today. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting things, and hopefully it'll be stuff that I know that you and I already do, but it'll be stuff that other people in the restoration industry can really benefit from.
I love it. So for those that may not be familiar with you, they haven't heard the name, fill in some of the gaps on my intro. Let everybody know exactly who you are, what you do.
My name is Mario Rios. I am the owner of Claim Preparation Experts. We do estimating, appraisal, and umpire work. I've been in this industry for about 15 years. We mainly service public adjusters, water restoration companies, and law firms in about 5 different states. So anything estimating related, we've probably seen or done, and kind of guide you in the route of what works, what doesn't work. I'm a double agent because I do work for both sides. So I've got carrier clients that do vendor work and stuff like that. So I see the good, the bad, and the ugly from all aspects of the industry.
Which is really exciting, right? Because you and I, we've done quite a bit of business together, and the insights that you bring to the table when it comes down to proper estimating, what to include in an estimate, when it's wise to include something or exclude something. And more importantly, the reasoning behind it is that unique perspective that you bring to the table, I think, has always been really interesting with a lot of the files that you and I have worked together, which is one of the primary reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, is because of that experience. There's lots of great estimators out there. There's no question about it. But very few people, I really feel, have their finger on the pulse of what's really going on behind the scenes on not only the mitigation side for the contractor, but then also on the insurance carrier side, and really have a good feel for what's going on. So I think this is going to be a really cool and fun conversation, and maybe we're going to be shedding a whole lot of light on some new tactics maybe that people should be considering when doing estimating. So talk to us about, top level estimating, and let's get right into the ugly part, right? What is the biggest mistakes that people are making? And when I say people, I'm talking water mitigation, mold remediation contractors, restoration contractors as a general whole. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see they're making when they're putting together these estimates or these invoices to the carrier?
I think the first thing, and it's what you and I talk about a lot, is what I'm putting to paper. Does it make sense? Does it follow the narrative of what I actually did on site? And I think it goes back to the biggest downfall that I see from water restoration companies is lack of their documentation, lack of an explanation, lack of how they came up with the figures that they put into these estimates, right? I mean, we all want jobs to be big jobs. Everybody wants these jobs to be great. But I see when I do appraisal or umpire work, and you've got a guy that had a leak in a bathroom and they had dehues and air movers in there, and it's a $10,000 invoice. So you're going, the reality behind it is when you look at the scope of work that was done in X, Y, and Z, there's just stuff that an estimate will take anything you input into it, right? So I can make any estimate be $20,000. I can make any estimate be $30,000. But when it goes to get dissected and looked at, did what I put in there actually make sense? Can I justify what I put in there? The equipment that was used, do we have pictures? Do we have logs? Do we have any of that type of stuff? So that when the carrier goes to tell you, well, I'm not paying you for this, this, or this. Well, hold on a second. Here's my proof as to A, it was on site, B, it was actually used, and here's why I had to use it. I am always astounded as to how many companies don't have any of that, right? They just submit this estimate. They don't have pictures. They don't have thermal imaging. They don't have 3/4 of the stuff that they need to be able to justify it, right? We all got to know, anybody that's been in this long enough understands that at the end of the day, and I think we've thought it's a paper battle, right? Do you have the documentation to justify your invoice, your bill, and your services? Do the things that you're putting in there make sense? If you're billing for thermal images, but you don't have proof you took thermal images, you shouldn't have it in your invoice. I think a lot of times, from what I see is it's cookie cutter. Everybody just wants to get their estimate done as quickly as possible. I think for me, it's interesting, but a lot of people find the estimating as the most boring part of this process, right? But again, I see so many unique things. I was at a huge fire loss on Monday when I got back from vacation, where I was on site for several hours. And yesterday I had one where, it's my 15 years of doing this, I've never done anything like this one before. We had a massive Freon leak that infected the entire home. So I mean, like, there's a glossy film over everything in the house, and it actually killed 2 of the pets on the premises. That's how bad the leak was from one day to the next, almost. So it's right. So it's never dull. You always have to create something and figure out how to write this estimate. But when I get appraisal work, when I get umpire work, and I'm looking at some of these restoration things, that's where I see the biggest deficiency is. And I know that sometimes the restoration companies either do it in-house or, because I've been called to write estimates for them sometimes, and, how cheap can you do it? And I said, well, do you want cheap, or do you want it done right?
Right.
Because sometimes you can have both, but a lot of times when you're paying for something, you're paying $50 for an estimate. Well, the product you're getting is probably that, right? Like,
right.
The guy probably just has a macro, puts the same macro in for every estimate, and in and out as quickly
what is
as
it?
possible.
What's the general rule? Good, fast, and cheap. You can only have 2, right? You can have anything you want, but you can only have 2, right?
Right. And I mean, listen, we all do it from time to time, but I get the call, hey, I need this one tomorrow. Hold on a second, dude. Like, you waited 3 weeks to get something over to me. Now you want me to stop what I'm doing because you have a deadline to get it turned in tomorrow, and you also want me to do it for the cheapest price possible.
Right.
That's not how things work.
Right. So is the documentation issue, from what you see, is this like across the board, right? Regardless of company size, do you feel that this is a pretty universal practice where, and I know that, look, like, nobody wants to just out there and blatantly say, I don't really document my losses, right? But at the end of the day, like, we're all human. Like, there's always, I think that every company has that project where something, either A, you documented it and you lost the file. There's technology issues, picture files get lost, documentation gets lost. It happens, right? But of course, nobody ever admits, to the fact of them not always having a perfect file. So do you find that this is like a size issue, a company culture issue? Do you find that it's just bad training from the onset? Like, what do you think the root cause of poor documentation in support of the narrative, the actual narrative, of what's happening on this project? Where do you think that stems from?
I think it stands from it's something that we've talked about in other situations and in the classes that we do is having a protocol, right? Having a strategy in place for how you manage these jobs, right? And a lot of times it's difficult. You may have 3 or 4 things running at the same time. You've got an owner that's probably hopping from one place to the next. Especially if it's a smaller operation, they may not have like a project manager that's handling all of these things. So it's tough. It's tough to document, right? You might have newer guys. They don't know all the processes from when they have to be there on site. But I think one of the things that, companies need to get in place is having a standard operating procedure. Hey, every time we go to a home, we're going to do this every single time, right? We're going to sketch the property, or we're going to document the initial pictures, whatever it is, whatever order you want to do things in, right? Take the logs properly, that type of stuff. I don't know how many times I get that there's no, moisture readings or moisture mapping of the water damage on a property, right? And like some of that stuff, like you said, there's different softwares that you can use, there's different programs you can use, and I just don't think people invest in their own business to be able to maximize what they do. Again, I'll say thermal imaging. It's one of the easiest things that you can do. A thermal imaging camera can result into a $250 part of your invoice for every single thing you do, right? So I don't understand why a water restoration company wouldn't come on site and take thermal images of the loss, right? You're going to document A, where it's actually wet, and B, you're going to document with that thermal imaging the potential of water in areas that was not visible, right? Which will allow you to then put further equipment into that location, right? So little things like that, moisture mapping a home, it's not that difficult to do. And there's a software you can use to do it. Taking pictures and categorizing them by date, categorizing them by indoor humidity, outdoor humidity readings, that type of stuff. A lot of companies don't do that. And then when they send in that $9,000-$10,000 invoice, the carrier immediately slashes and tells you, oh, we're going to give you $2,200. And now you're going as the business owner who's invested this time and employees and all of this work into drying out a location, and now you have an issue, right? Because now you got a $6,000-$7,000 difference between what you were expecting to make on a job and what the carrier is willing to pay you on it, right? And then when you go to combat those differences, you don't have any ammunition, you don't have any bullets in your gun to be able to justify the invoice. And I know we've got timelines in terms of, if it's over $3,000, you've got to get carrier approval for certain things. And, a lot of times people just don't even read these policies, right? They'll go in, they do the job, and then they worry about how they have to deal with the carrier down the road. We talked about it before. Guys end up going into litigation sometimes because, their invoice only got paid a percentage of what they were looking for. A lot of restoration companies don't know. They're allowed to demand appraisal just like the public adjuster is.
Right.
And that route sometimes is faster, right? So if you have a cash flow issue with your restoration company because you've got 30 files that are sitting in litigation, well, you might have been able to settle 10 of those or 15 of those through the appraisal process, and it would have taken you a quarter of the time to do so, right? So it's knowing what you can and can't get away with. And again, we all know, look, the carriers do things sometimes that are absolutely ridiculous, but you got to understand from their perspective, some of the stuff that they get in is absolutely ridiculous, right? So, they lump us all in together. They lump everybody in together. They think we're all bad at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter what state you're in. I do work in several different states, and I hear the same things across the board. I'm based out of Florida, but I hear the same things in Texas, California, New York, where, these restoration companies have a hard time getting the carriers to want to pay for the stuff that actually got done.
Right. And that totally makes sense. So let me ask you this, as far as, the overall process, right? So we understand that documentation is obviously one of the most important aspects of getting paid from the insurance carrier. What I've also seen quite a bit of is the cash pay jobs, right? Where they say, hey, you know what? We're just going to pay you out of pocket. We're not going to involve insurance. What ends up happening is that, well, you're like, okay, well, this is a cash pay job. They're good with the price. We don't have to worry about anything. So here's the invoice. We're just going to go ahead and do our thing. We're not really going to document anything. We're not going to do what we would normally do as if it was insurance. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks down the road, they're like, you know what? I think we are going to get insurance involved. And now here you are, you already did the project, you invoiced a certain way, maybe you did bulk invoicing, whatever it was, right? But now the insurance company starts calling you and you're like, well, I don't have that because it wasn't structured this way. Right. So now all of a sudden you've got like this
mistake, right?
Right. So
a huge mistake.
So really at the core, you just really have to treat each and every single project with an SOP. All of your people that you have, whoever that may be, they're like just going down the list. Is this necessary? Did I do this? Did I do that? Yes. Regardless if it's insurance or if it's cash pay, like across the board, you just need to have that process.
100%, right? So the way that I write an estimate that I am writing, that it's got my letterhead and my company information on, that I am taking responsibility for, I always treat it the following way. If that claim is denied, what am I going to do when I have to sit down in front of a judge or an attorney for a deposition and justify what I've put to paper? Can I back that up? And I think it's got to be the same way. It's got to have the same mentality as a water restoration company or general contractor, whether it's cash pay or whether you're doing an AOB for the homeowner. Because here's what happens sometimes, which the restoration company might not think about when they tell you, oh, I'm going to pay you cash. Cool. They may still turn around and use that cash invoice down the road and try to present it to the insurance company as a cost incurred. So you may still get drugged into this claim process, even though you were informed that, hey, this is a cash job, you're not going to have to deal with the insurance company, right? So no matter what, whether it's AOB, cash, whatever, document it, treat it the same way. Do your same standard operating procedure every time you walk in that door.
Right.
That way they can't call into question regardless of how you do it.
Right. And that's something that we see quite a bit, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to document this one. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be involved with the insurance company. This is a quick project. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks pass by. All of a sudden, you're on the phone with the adjuster, but like, which client is this? I don't have a claim. Like, no, so it's just funny how that works.
Forget weeks.
Yeah.
Imagine if a year passed by.
Yeah, exactly right.
Right? Because remember, these guys have 3 years in Florida law to be able to reopen up a claim or demand supplements or go into litigation or whatever, right? So a year or two down the road, you may get a phone call on that job you did, where you did water extraction or mold remediation. And now they want your documentation.
Right.
And you don't have anything.
Yep. And that's why, like, and as a side note, costs incurred to me is like one of my personal favorite aspects of the insurance billing world, assuming that you have the right client that has a financial wherewithal to actually support that. Because again, most policies, they are in fact indemnification policies, right? It's meant to go ahead and make you full again. So when you have the right client and you can go ahead and still document everything, keep that in your back pocket, one big invoice. Now they've got this paid in full invoice. They submit that to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier, in my opinion, I feel you put your client in a much better position by having that kind of a play where it's like, now they're looking at this invoice that was already paid for. The other part of this chess game is now that's all they see. They just see this paid in full. So they're immediately thinking, oh, okay, we're going to be able to knock this down, or we're going to, because they probably didn't document this and that. When you do get that call, because you will, if you do have your pictures, you have your thermal, you have it documented as if it was an insurance claim, because ultimately it's all about covering your ass as well, just protecting your customer, right? Once you have that, you submit everything in. Usually those are slam dunk cases for the customer, assuming that you play it that way. So one of the costs incurred, not only does it help with cash flow, but also just in making sure that the customer is well taken care of, assuming that they have the financial wherewithal. Again, I mean, it's really a home run. So let's talk about actual estimating. Like let's get down into some of the nitty gritty. What are some of the biggest line? And again, when it comes down to estimating, line items seems to be the thing. Everybody's talking about line items. What line items do I need to put in? What line items should I need to put out? Should I make adjustments because Xactimate is wrong? Like all of these different, technical type issues. What are some of the biggest red flags that you see when it comes down to estimating and how estimators should go into a loss? What's the perspective that they should have first before they even start filling out their estimate?
All right. So that, the estimating line item stuff can be very intriguing and very interesting. I think that the first thing you should do is, depending on the equipment, most guys are going to tell you, oh, we're using IRCSC guidelines and X, Y, and Z. That's why we had to do this. There's certain times that what I would probably tell people to do is, if the guidelines say you're supposed to use a large DHU and you used an extra large DHU, you don't get to bill for the extra large DHU because you didn't have the right equipment. Okay, so that's one of the things where I think the carriers will sometimes come back and say you're billing for equipment that, yeah, you may have had it on site, but the guidelines say you were only supposed to use this size and you're billing for a larger size. So that's one of the things where I think a lot of times the carriers will fight you on those specific line items. And look, Xactimate is not a perfect science, okay? Xactimate does not have the end all and is 100% accurate for everything. I hear a lot of that where people say, oh, well, the billing on it per item, per day use, it's not enough. So I'm going to up it up to X, Y, and Z, right? Like, I think the air movers are like $27 or $28 per 24-hour cycle period. And then there's guys that tell you, well, I'm going to bill it at $50 or $60 an hour. Okay, I mean, no one's going to tell you you can't bill it at that hourly rate, but what's your justification for it, right? Just because you want to bill more for the hourly rate. So it's a slippery slope when you are going against the almost industry standard of pricing. And there are other softwares which carrier use, which give vendor pricing, which can be really low compared to Xactimate. So I think people complain about Xactimate, but it's a fair price point. Now, if you told me, hey, I think it's a little low, I'm going to bump it up an extra couple dollars per day. Okay, I don't think anybody's going to really complain about that. But when you're doubling or tripling the cost, it's on the system, you're going to get pushback. And you're going to get pushback as to asking for justification for why the price point is so significantly different. Not only from the carrier, down the road, you're going to get pushback on that from either an appraiser, an umpire, or a law firm, right? So you're going to have a really good reason as to why you bump something up to that level. A lot of the other things that I tend to like to do, and it's things that you and I have talked about, is Xactimate, for example, when you have cleaning stuff to do because of mold. I personally don't like to do any estimates where you're doing cleaning this surface, cleaning that light, cleaning, dehumidifying this or that. You and I like to set things up where we are doing it via, hey, we had to do mold remediation or cleaning remediation at this site, and I had 5 guys there for XY number of hours. That as a water restoration company is going to give you a far greater return on your work, far greater return on the job than it is if you're individually trying to get paid for, I cleaned the light bulb, I cleaned the lamp, I cleaned inside of a cabinetry. Those line items are there, in my opinion, for when you are you're doing just water restoration and you had to clean a few things. But when you're doing an actual full-blown remediation cleaning of a location, as a restoration company, you are far better off using an hourly rate, making sure you have a supervisor on site so you can bill supervisory hours and things of that nature, as opposed to just doing line items for the individual cleaning of individual items on site.
Is that something that you see quite often happen, where there's projects that should be billed from an hourly perspective as opposed to on a per line item perspective?
I think you see it more where that's what the carrier wants you to try to do, right? The carrier, because they know that's the much cheaper route, but there's no obligation for you to do it that way. There's no guideline for you that says you have to bill per item.
Right. And I think part of it is like, people need to understand, like, Xactimate or any estimating tool that you use, it's just that, first of all, it's an estimating, it's in the name, estimating tool. Like, it's a tool. Like, so understanding how to use the tool in your favor to justify the costs that you need to stay in business, I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, right? It doesn't matter if you've got your own price list or whatever.
Let's talk about one of the ugly things, right? The restoration companies put in on all their estimates overhead and profit.
Right.
Are you entitled to overhead and profit as a restoration company, right? So, the carriers every single time will tell you no, you're not. And there's guys that will fight you until they're blue in the face telling you I'm entitled to it, right? And let's talk about the reality of it. The overhead and profit is intended for charges performed by a general contractor, a contractor of some sort that is doing duties as a contractor. An electrician is allowed to charge that. A plumber is allowed to charge that. A GC is allowed to charge that. What I always tell my clients is if you didn't perform any duties as a contractor, technically you're not entitled to charge it. As much as you may not want to hear that, it's not, the carrier is going to tell you we need 3 trades for your overhead and profit to be something that we consider. hogwash. Okay. There's nothing anywhere that mandates there being 3 trades in order to be able to charge overhead and profit. But everything that I've seen is it does mandate that it be those types of trades that can charge overhead and profit. They don't like to pay it to roofers. There's nothing that says a roofer cannot charge overhead and profit. According to most building codes, they're allowed to do so. They're a contractor. Where I think a lot of the restoration companies get into trouble is that. And I don't want to say trouble, but they have these things on their bill that they don't want to budge, that they don't want to take off, right? So,
and where it gets even further and where it gets even muddier, right, is where, well, a water mitigation company, if they're only doing water, they're like, well, I'm a contractor. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you are a contractor, right? But where it gets really funny here in Florida is you get into the debate of water mitigation and then mold. Because now mold, are you a contractor? Well, I mean, you're state licensed, right? So you're carrying the same style of license as the plumber, as the roofer, as the electrician.
And the scope of work that you're doing. So I would use that argument, but also the scope of work of what you're having to do associated with the removal of mold items encompass the job of a contractor. You're removing drywall, you're removing potentially flooring, you're removing cabinetry, things of that nature, which have been infested with the mold. So you are actually during that process potentially performing duties of an actual contractor. Whereas when you're doing just water restoration and you're coming in and putting dehues and air movers and solely doing that, it's a harder sell to get them to justify the overhead and profit, right? And again, we all know we want to make overhead and profit on every job because heck, that's where you make your money. But if instead of doing overhead and profit, if you were billing additional supervisory hours or additional cleaning hours as part of that remediation solely for water, well, guess what? You might get your invoice paid a heck of a lot faster, right? You might get your invoice paid for 80 or 90% of that number that you're trying to bill, as opposed to sending in an invoice with overhead and profit and a bunch of stuff on there, and you're sending a $6,000 or $7,000 invoice, and maybe you were there for 2 days, right, or 3 days. And when you go back and you look at it, if you probably sent an invoice maybe in for 4, you might have gotten it paid a lot faster because you didn't have certain things on there that to the carrier is a red flag, right? So it's all about, I've got a couple clients that do vendor work for the carrier, and a lot of people look down on the guys that do vendor work for the carriers. Oh, they're the worst people in the industry. They're selling us out. They're the ones that make these things difficult for everybody. And some of them are that way. I won't say no. But some of the guys that I do stuff with, they're in, they're out. They're there for 2 or 3 days. They do what's required. And they're billing their $3,000 or $4,000 per job. They're not putting any fluff in it. And they're getting their 15, 20 jobs a month from the carrier, right? So you got to look at what makes sense for you and how you're operating your business. But specific line items, I think the big thing is that you see a lot of guys put in like OSHA requirements into a lot of these estimates, and you're sitting there going, okay, that's not an OSHA requirement that has anything to do with what you did on site, right? So you saw somebody else put an OSHA on one of their estimates for something, so they copy and put it in on theirs. But that OSHA requirement has nothing to do with what's being done in the home, right? So just you start to put all these things, like I said, an estimate will take any number you put into it. But then when the carrier gets it, they're like, oh, this is a hogwash. I'm not paying any of this. And they pay you the bare.
Right. And or the opposite side of this, right? The entire opposite side of this whole billing and estimating argument could very simply be a conversation that looks something like this. Listen, Mr. or Mrs. Property Owner, this is my price. My price does not necessarily line up with industry standard pricing because I want to stay in business. Do you want to hire me? Yes. Ultimately, you are responsible for this end price. End of discussion, right? And then you can put the period on it, because really, like, a lot of these debates about like estimating and it's like, how do you get more, really boils down to every company and every business owner wants to hit a certain number, right? They have a certain profit margin. And look, I get it. Like, we all get it. Go to the local gas station. Gas is more expensive. Go to your grocery store. Gallon of milk is much more expensive, right? Like, things are going up in price, and that money comes out of somewhere, right? And that cost kind of trickles down, to the person who's buying that product and or service. So the fact that you're in business and you want to charge X amount, like, that's not a sin. But when you start pumping line items into an estimate, if you're using a tool and you're trying to make that tool hit a certain number and you can't based on the tool itself, and you're going to start to create some havoc there, just you could always flip the script and be like, hey, look, can't make it work on this, but this is what I need to do the job. Who's paying me?
But here's the thing, right? Is it the tool's fault that you can't make it work, or is it that you're trying to maybe be unrealistic in what you're doing, right? So the tool is there, and so I tell people, Xactimate is there for me to get you what you need, right? So you got to tell me what you really did. You and I talk about before we write an estimate for anything for you. Yeah, you take your pictures. Yeah, you take your logs, X, Y, and Z. We talk about how much the equipment was on site. We talk about those beginning points, but then you and I talk about the details of what transpired there, right? Because like you said, not every file is perfect. And maybe you didn't write something down the day that you were there, but when you and I start talking about what was done on site, oh, wait, you're right, Mario, I did do this, or I did do that, or I did have to get an extra dumpster, or I did have to do whatever it is. And those are things that you can put into the estimate, right? So even if you were just doing water restoration, if you have a supervisor on site every single day, you're allowed to bill for that supervisor. If a supervisor is coming in to verify and see what was done and check what the technicians did, who says you're not allowed to bill for that? But people don't, right? Or they bill for things like, look, let's be honest. I see it on these estimates all the time. $1,500 check processing fee. Why is the carrier going to pay you a check processing fee for you to be able to process the check for the work you did for your client? And why would it be $1,500? You know what I mean? Like, let's be realistic about these things, right? Like the carrier has no duty to pay you $1,500 for you to get.
And not to say that people aren't getting paid for it. Like, I'm sure that there's some people listening and be like, well, I'm getting paid for it. Cool. Yeah, that's fine. But I'm saying as a general rule, right? As a general rule, right, you're probably going to get some pushback on it.
Yeah. And there might be extenuating circumstances where it is something that is warranted on a bill, right? Nothing is ever set in stone. But for the normal day-to-day stuff, you're not going to get a check processing fee, right? I mean, I think one of the things that I see on there a lot is restocking charges that, guys put on their estimates. And that's, carrier's not going to pay you a restocking charge. You have to take equipment out to go do a job and then bring it back to your location. That's part of your running your business, right? So, I think we're not, Amazon or one of these places where when you return a product, they want to charge you a restocking fee, So you just got to look at some of these things and see what makes sense. But then also don't shortchange yourself. And I think if you go back and you document and categorize and figure out exactly what you did on a job, there's ways to input that into Xactimate that make sense to get you what you're looking for.
I love it. So let's talk real quick about macros. Let's talk about things that can go ahead and facilitate overall workflow. But before we jump into that, let's just take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. Hey, Dominators, real quick, let me ask you a question. How would you like to increase productivity? How would you like faster claims resolution? And more importantly, how would you like to reduce litigation? Well, this is exactly what Impartial allows you to do. Impartial creates timely, accurate estimates for faster and fair claim settlement. Building upon Matterport's technology, the Impartial Scope tool extracts the relevant data embedded with pre-mitigation and post-mitigation scans and subsequently renders an Xactimate or assemblability estimate that can be approved by a carrier without any hesitation. The magic here is that the software helps contractors generate mitigation and repair estimates for more rapid approval from insurance carriers while removing the burdensome administrative process. Each Impartial estimate is produced with objective accuracy using immersive 3D imagery and precise physical and geospatial measurements. Impartial, in my opinion, is one of those tools that simply can go ahead and change your business. And with so many features such as Impartial tags, timestamp matter tags, the ability to upload JPEG, PNG, ESX, and so much more. Impartial is that software that could genuinely change your business. Make sure that you check them out in the video description below or in the show notes and see for yourself. Hey, Dominators, real quick, let me ask you a question. Have policyholders struggled to come up with your money because it's held with the mortgage company? Or does the percentage of uncollected debt that you collected in 2021 exceed over 2.5%? Or even better, let me ask you this. Do you dread negotiating with your policyholder when it comes time to collect your final payment and deductible? So look, if you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need to check out Surety. You see, Surety is a third-party fund control company. And what they do is they ensure that you get paid faster and, more importantly, completely for the hard work that your crews are doing. Surety relieves not only the policyholder, but you of tremendous administrative burden while ensuring the claims process and, more importantly, the proceeds flow via ACH to the rightful owner, you, the restorer. And here's the best part. For less than the average credit card fee, Surety delivers on numerous fronts. So here's what I want you to do. If you want to learn more about how Surety can help you, I want you to head on over to www.surety.com/dominate and request a free demo today. Now listen, Restoration Domination listeners, just like you, are going to receive a really cool offer. And here it is. You're going to receive an exclusive offer, which includes free processing for the first insurance claims check and 3 months of free access within their network. Again, that's Surety, SURETI.com/dominate. Photo documentation is possibly one of the most important aspects of what it is that we do in the restoration business. Not only so that the client knows exactly what's going on, but also so that you can prove your work to insurance companies. One of the best ways that I found to go ahead and document our projects is by using Company Cam. Company Cam is an amazing app. It has so many features, everything from time-stamped and GPS located photos, individual project files, unlimited photo storage, in-app communication with your crew, a live stream of all of your projects as the photos are coming in, as if it was an Instagram feed. So from a managerial standpoint, Company Cam can help you there as well. But more importantly, it gives you the ability to protect your organization while documenting and keeping everything nice and neat. So we've got a really special offer for you. If you go to companycam.com/dominate, not only will you get your 14-day free trial, but you're also going to get the first 2 months 50% off. So again, head on over to companycam.com/dominate, get the app, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right, so we're back. So let's just talk real quick.
I'm digging the intro. Yeah. I'm digging the sponsorship.
So let's go ahead and talk about the macros and things that estimators should do or the company should be looking at in order to kind of facilitate their estimating process. What should a really good, effective flow look like in the world of estimating?
To me, the first thing you do is you take pictures of everything, starting from the outside, the inside. I tell people, have cheat sheets. If you think you're going to be there 4 or 5 days, have a little sign that says day 1, click, take all your pictures of day 1. Day 2, click, take all your pictures of day 2. Listen, I get it. It's boring to sit there and have to take pictures every day, right? Like, nobody wants to do that, but it's the best way to justify what you want to bill. Right? And at the end of the day, let's say the person that's in charge of documenting that is your supervisor. One of your supervisors on site every day for 2 hours, right? You were there for 5 days. So now you're billing 10 hours of supervisory to that estimate that's probably going to be $400, $500, $600 for that specific job. I think the other thing that most people should do, which they do not, I think the good companies do this, is they need to learn and teach their guys how to sketch. Go in and sketch out the property so that you can document and have accurate measurements for linear feet of baseboards, square footage of flooring, potential for if you need to do ozone treatments, or exactly how many square feet or cubic feet of whatever it is you have that are going to be required for cleaning purposes. I think a lot of people don't do that. I get a lot of stuff where, we were there for 5 days and I used 3D hues. Okay, well, where did you use them? Oh, they were here and here. Oh, okay, well, I had to clean these surfaces. Well, how much did you clean, right? Like, in this industry, measurements are important. They're almost one of the most important things, right? If you have to do stuff like removal of baseboards, well, were those baseboards discarded or did you have to keep them on site, right? Because there's times that you have to remove the baseboards, but they're being kept there. Well, did you have to take time to remove those baseboards and categorize them and label them? That's not just the removal, right? So you can bill additional hours for categorizing and labeling them so that they could be reused if they were just being detached and not removed and thrown out, right? So it's the minutia of things that will get you paid properly and will get you the least amount of pushback. Because if you've got that $10,000 estimate, the removal of cabinetry, and all those types of things. And then you've got the pictures to justify it. And you've got everything to back up what you're putting on there. The carrier may not want to pay you for it initially, but you're either going to get it from an appraiser, an umpire, or in litigation, right? And as opposed to you got this $10,000 bill, you don't have any of the meat and potatoes to it. And then down the road, when you only get paid $5, then you're upset that you weren't able to get more money, and you're mad at the attorney or the appraiser or the umpire or whoever, right? And at the end of the day, who you really need to be mad at is yourself because you didn't document it. So I would tell people, take pictures, take a sketch, take your thermal imaging, take your readings as part of your day-to-day every single time you go into a claim. And then from there, start to figure out what needs to be done. Do a moisture mapping if necessary. Use software that's going to store those pictures in a cloud so you don't lose them like you and I just talked about, right? Keep yourself organized. I mean, I write for 28 different companies. I've got everything categorized all the way back to 2010 by year, by client, by client, and then by sub-client as well, right? So, you got to keep yourself organized. It's a pain at times, and it drives us all insane. But it's really what's going to be the most helpful thing to be able to get you the most amount of money on these things.
Right. So talk to me about what your services are exactly, because obviously you write for a lot of different companies, a lot of different organizations. Some people listening to this will be like, well, I already have like an in-house estimator. Why would I ever have the need for, an outside estimator? What's the response to that? Like, where is it that Mario Rios comes into play as an A player for organizations?
I think it just depends on the organization, right? So there's companies that get to the point where they can do everything in-house. And they have guys, or they'll have a full-time guy that just writes their estimates. And if that works for you, that is awesome. I mean, I think that's great, right? There's no shame in that. And I think a lot of people go that route sometimes. But I think some of the companies, when they're starting off, or some of the companies sometimes get too busy, and they get to the point where they can't handle the volume of what they're doing. So if you are backed up on writing your estimates by more than a couple of weeks, you're not processing your business the right way. You're taking too long to get your documentation out. You're taking too long to be able to get paid for these things because your estimates are just sitting there, right? And I hear that all the time. I get phone calls every once in a while like, oh man, hey, I got 20 estimates sitting around that I haven't been able to get to right. Can I send you those? Or the estimator we were using is so backed up that, I've got X, Y, and Z sitting around, and it's adjusters and it's water restoration companies. And I need these things taken care of so I can bill for them. So it just depends where you are in your business and structure as to whether you would use an outside estimator or not. And I think at the end of the day, whether you're doing it in-house or you're using somebody on the outside, I say I am the tip of the sword, so to speak, right? I am there to be your tool. I'm not the one that tells you what goes into an estimate. You have to tell me what you did for me to be able to get the processing and use my knowledge to then input that into Xactimate for you to be able to get you the highest estimate possible. But an estimator, whether it's me or anybody, if you're asking us to kind of from scratch figure out what you did, you're not going to have a quality estimate. So that one of the things that we do is that, we write estimates for different companies in 5 or 6 states. We write for a lot of public adjusters. And then the second or third phase of what we do is we do appraisal, and I also do umpire business. I get a lot of appraisal files from public adjusters. That's the main source, public adjusters and attorneys. But we also get water restoration appraisal files, which I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years. And I don't think a lot of companies know that they can do that. They go the route of litigation. And then it's funny, they'll sit there and fight about it in litigation. And sometimes the carrier will be the one that demands appraisal. Right. And I'll get a phone call from an attorney. Hey, man, I got 5 files the carrier demanded appraisal on. Can you take these from me? I can't send them back to the water restoration company. They won't let them be their own appraiser. So we dabble in all 3 sides of that, and we do stuff on the carrier side as well, which is why I know sometimes that the guys on the other side aren't as bad as we think they are sometimes. They're fighting with the carriers too, even as a approved vendor. They're fighting with the carrier sometimes on their invoicing, and they're the guys that the carrier sends out, So the bad guy isn't the other restoration company, it's the carrier at times. And they're, they try to make everything fit in this one little block and this one little square. And if it's not in there, then they just tell you no. But I think as a business owner who's in this industry, you've got to learn to write estimates. Then once you know how to write your estimates, or once you know what you're doing, if you want to bring a guy in-house to do them for you and pay them full-time, fantastic. If you want to pay per estimate, which is what most of our guys end up doing, sometimes that's more cost effective for you as a business owner, right? So sometimes guys will sit back and say, I'm going to hire somebody and have to pay them 50 grand a year to write estimates for me. I'd rather pay a per use, per estimate fee until I get to that point where I think I really need somebody in-house, because I'm only writing 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 estimates a month, right? So it all depends your workflow as to what you're doing, how many claims you're working on, and so on and so forth, as to whether you should go in-house with an estimator or hire somebody to do it. And then if you're having somebody do it for you in-house, invest in them, right? Invest in making sure that they go out and learn the softwares, learn the data, learn how to input them, take classes on Xactimate, take some classes. You and I talk about this stuff where, the carrier can't tell you, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be done if you're following guidelines that are in place by the building department, right? So, or guidelines that are in place from a mold protocol. I just had a conversation yesterday with one of our PAs that we both do work with, and they were asking about an estimate for mold. And I said, well, where's your protocol? I don't have one. Then you don't have anything, right? Like, you did mold testing and it confirmed that there was mold, but if you didn't get a protocol as to what needs to be done for the mold remediation, you don't have anything, right? Like, I can't tell you what needs to be done. You can't say what needs to be done. The company that came in and did the mold testing has to give you a protocol as to where you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then after that protocol, anybody can write you an estimate, whether it's the restoration company, me, whoever, but learn how to read those things. I think one of the first things that I did when I started writing estimates is I did everything I could to learn from the guy that was on the other side, right? And once you start to meet quality adjusters, quality people, and they're not all going to be good, but the guys that are good, that are helpful, that aren't defensive when you ask them questions, or, hey, look, here's what I'm trying to do. I had one the other day where I was writing the estimate and I met with the public adjuster and the carrier's adjuster. So, look, here's what we're thinking. Here's how I'm going to put it. It's going to be sketched out. If you want my ESX, I'll give that to you. But here's what we're thinking. Do you have any issues with what I'm going to put on here? If so, why? And can we come to a kind of, here's what makes sense from the beginning, so that when you get my estimate, you're not going, well, I didn't agree to any of this, right? And have that
communication. Simple.
Conversation goes a huge way, right? And it's a lot of guys don't have them. A lot of guys will show up and immediately they're combative with the guy on the other side. And I get that sometimes that's warranted. I'm not telling you it's not. But a lot of times if you sit there and can have a conversation, you might realize you can agree on a lot more from the onset if you talk about why you want to do it and why your rationale is. And there's some guys that have blinders on, right? No matter what you tell them, they're going to tell you no. Okay, so don't waste your time with those guys, right? And you'll know that after having a conversation with somebody for a few minutes, whether it's going to be worth your time or not to go down that route. But a lot of these guys will sit there and talk to you about it. Hey, man, I don't know if I can do this, or I don't know if I can do that. I may not be able to approve it, but maybe.
But I could do this other thing, right? So again, it's just like, it's one of those situations where if you walk in and you already feel like it's going to be a combative situation, the battle's already lost, right? But if you go into the situation and you're there to be helpful, you're there to be amicable, you've got a job that needs to be done, and just simply communicate and be like, hey, look, just make your life easier. Like, this is what we're looking to do. This is why it is that we're looking to do it. Where are we at? Right?
Diffuse the conversation, right? The guy's immediately combative before you've even started. Heck, hit him with a joke over the head, right? Like, well, I think this one's easily going to be a $50,000 or $60,000 bill. That guy's going to fall off his chair and be like, what? I'm just messing with you, man. I just wanted to, let's really figure it out. I'd like to talk to you about it. Do you think we could do X, Y, and Z? Here's what I'm thinking, right? And a lot of times that guy that's super combative might bring his guard down because he appreciated the fact that you tried to de-escalate a tense situation. I mean, listen, I get appraisal files and I'll walk in, and the first thing I sometimes tell the guy on the other side is, listen, man, I didn't write the estimate. Can we try to figure this out and do something that actually makes sense? Because they'll walk in, the guy's got a $2,500 estimate from the insurance company, and I've got a $300,000 estimate from a public adjuster, right? Like, do you really think sometimes you're going to be able to find a common ground? No, a lot of times you're going through the motion, right? But there's times that I get that $350,000 estimate and I look at it and I go, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Or that doesn't make sense, right? And you'll walk in and tell the guy, hey, listen, there's stuff on here. I understand why they put it, but I can understand why you guys balked at it. So if I back off some of these things, do you think we might be able to do something here that makes sense? And there's some guys that will tell you yes. There's some guys that will tell you no. There's some guys that down the road will remember the fact that you tried to bridge that conversation, and they may not be able to do it on that one, but they might be able to do it on the next one. And if you're a jerk from the onset, well, the only thing he's going to remember is that you were a jerk from the
Exactly
outset.
right.
So just listen. Everybody's got their job to do in this. This is a numbers game at the end of the day. That's the reality of it, right? This is not we want to help the client. We want to do right by the client. That's fine. And that's true. But at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. This is a justifying how do we get to numbers game. And how do you do that if the other side is combative and you're combative as well? There's no bridging the gaps.
Makes it that much more difficult. 100%.
Makes it that much more
That's
difficult.
awesome, dude. So let's give the audience here real quick. If people are watching the show, they're listening to the show, they're like, hey, you know what? I could use an outside estimator right now. Like that's kind of the stage that we're at, or they just really, like your overall perspective. Where can people go ahead and get a hold of you at?
Call Rico. That's the first thing I'd tell you. That
Do
way it's
not
easier for me.
not call me. I'm on an entirely new, self-secluded type schedule. My phone is off the majority of the day. I'm only checking my text messages certain portions of the day. I'm only checking my phone calls that are coming in so do not call me. But I tell you what I will do. I will leave a link in the video description and in the show notes to all of Mario Rios' contact information, so you can contact him. But go ahead, Mario.
Is that the first time you've gotten that? Is that the response? Most people then immediately give you their pitch, right? Nobody said to call Rico.
Nope, do not call Rico.
No, man, listen, I'm easy to get a hold of. You have my Instagram, our office is located in Coral Gables, so we're local in Florida. But like I said, we do virtual estimating in 5 different states. So a lot of guys just share with us their Dropboxes, their Google Drive. So you'll have our email address as well, which Rico has, our office phone number, my cell phone number, all that kind of good stuff. So like Rico, I'm always running around, but I'm always good to answer a text message. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Or, I get DMs on Instagram and that kind of stuff. I'm on LinkedIn and all those different places. So wherever it's easier for you to find me, if you think you need our services, you can get a hold of us. Or even if you've got a question. Actually, one of the things that we didn't talk about today, Rico, which is something maybe we can talk about on a future one if you want to have me back on, is doing peer reviews. That's a big thing that the carrier tries to hammer you back
right now.
with. Yeah, we didn't even start talking about that.
It's just entirely. So I have it here on my notes, but this is actually, that's going to be a bonus session for peer reviews for water mitigation companies. I think that is a segment in and of itself that needs its own little thing. So this right now, what we're doing, this would be considered the teaser for said conversation, because this is something that water mitigation companies as a general whole need to know about, that very, very few are tapping into. But you're right, we didn't discuss that, but for a strategic reason.
We didn't. And actually, it's funny because we didn't even talk about it. I remembered it now because we've talked about it in the past where, they tell you, oh, we sent your invoice in for peer review, so we're only paying you this. Well, cool. I also had my invoice peer reviewed. My peer review says the following. Now what? So that we definitely
we'll take a deep dive into that, but that's going to be on a bonus episode. So all you dominators out there, if you want to go ahead and make sure that you stay tuned, because we will be doing a bonus episode just on that one subject matter that I think is going to be really helpful for you and your business. But yes, so meanwhile, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be dropping all of your contact information in the video description below, as well as in the show notes. Restoration Domination. Make sure that you check out our boy Mario Rios. Mario, again, thank you so much for jumping on the show. And as always, hustle, hack, dominate. Let's go.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, your #1 resource for tips, tricks, and hacks to help your business grow. Subscribe to our channel and follow us for more Restoration Domination. And follow our host at Rico Garcia Jr. on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.